Tevye the dairyman did, and yet we know it's biblical, so we don't know what to do with that. So when you pray, don't be surprised if your Jewish friend feels uncomfortable. How does this guy talk to God like he's a friend? And yet they really respect it because they don't get anything like that at their synagogue. Nobody prays for them. And so many times when a Jewish person comes to faith in Yeshua, one of the things they tell me is, I lived in Florida for 7 years, and when I was in Florida, going to Temple Aaron Kodesh, I was telling you, there's a lot of older people down in Florida, retired, and they have older Jewish retired people with Christian Pentecostal maids and nannies and nurses that come and visit, all of these Haitian and Cuban and Pentecostal nurses that work in there, and of course they say, "Let me pray for you," and they're always praying for them. So I talk to them and they say, "I don't know about this Jesus, but my nurse, she's always praying for me, and I appreciate it. One time she prayed that I find my medicine," and I did. And so they remember that. And so if you can't talk to them about Jesus, talk to Jesus about that. Pray, offer to pray for them. Next, answer questions in the Bible. What do you do when they do start to ask you? Well, what do you think about this? Don't you, Messianic Jews or Christians, have 3 gods? And they ask you questions. What I'd say is when they do ask questions, first, always try to answer it from the Bible. Why is it important to open the Scriptures and try to answer it with the Scriptures open? Why is that important? Authority. What do you say?
Well, I was just going to say, I was saying the Hebrews, the Word of God is living, powerful, able to increase authority.
Right.
The power of the Word.
The power of the Word and authority.
That's not referring to
Common ground.
What?
Common ground.
Well, not if you're reading from the New Testament.
Oh, no, what I'm saying is for that.
But don't be afraid to answer from the New Testament either. Don't be afraid to answer their question from the Greek Hadashah. Because it says, I'm not answering you with my wise, educated speculations on the galaxies of the universe. I am giving you an answer from this book, which leads them to say, what else is in that book? Can I get one of those? I want to see what's in there, the authority. It's not you answering, it's the Scriptures, and that brings their attention to the Bible. And that leads them to say, what else is in there? And every time a Jewish person is answering and you're pointing them back into the Bible, even the New Testament, it makes them say, tell me what else is in that book, and can I get one of those? And of course, spiritually, the Scriptures, the sword that cuts between the spirit and the soul. And so, pointing to the Scriptures. Next, ask for a decision. Don't be afraid at some point to ask for a decision. To say, if the Bible's true, and Yeshua is the promised Messiah, we've been waiting, would you be willing to pray and believe in Him in spite of the cost? They can only say no. They can only say no if they're not ready. But by saying that, you put a target on the horizon, and you said, this is where this is going. Now they know where this is leading to. You may never be the person who prays with them and receive Yeshua as the Messiah, but that in their ear, in their heart, will let them know for whoever in the distant future God might bring into their life, with whom they pray to receive Yeshua. So you put that out there on the horizon. Don't be afraid to ask for a decision. And lastly, bring them to a congregation. Bring them here, bring them to a place where they can meet other believers in Yeshua. It's important for them to see a community of testimony. It's important for them to come and see that you're not the only one who believes this, and that there are others with whom God is working on life. Before we go on to Jewish sensitivities, questions? Check it out.
Yeah, when it comes to prayer, even the Habanikim are like that, because I talked to my friend and she seems to be like praying all the time. And even when we pray together, I pray Yoshem Yeshua HaMashiach, Amen. She's like, yeah, Amen. And I'm like, you know, I'm thinking, do you know what I'm saying? Because it doesn't seem alien or foreign to her.
And what is your background?
She's Habanik.
Habanik?
Yeah.
You know, among some of the Chabad, among some of the Orthodox, there's been an interesting copycat of evangelical Christians on the television. All those evangelical Christians on the television talking about praying you can be healed. It was interesting to watch the Chabad telethon a few years ago and see the Rabbi Mendel Kuhn on the Chabad telethon in Los Angeles on Labor Day. And he was talking like an evangelist. Send your money into Chabad and we will pray that you get healed. And so this is a new thing. Yeah, I'm serious. It's interesting. They're copying what they see televangelists doing. If televangelists can do this, we can do it too. They're trying to Judaize it, make it in a Jewish context. So you will run into some who are doing that. It's still pretty alien, I think, to most Jewish people who don't experience that. But no, don't be surprised if you see some of the real religious who are trying to do that. It's still not really typical of most Jewish people's context.
It occurs to me, and I want to know what you think, that this could work for a friend or a co-worker who says, well, I was brought up Catholic, but I haven't been since I'm 10 years old. Or the person that says, I've never been to any church. You can take that same information and proceed from there.
Yeah, you could do this with someone who's not at all from a Christian background, who is brought up Pakistani. And they're here in this country, or they're Vietnamese, and they're from a Buddhist background, and they're from a non-Christian background, and they won't necessarily be as intimidated as a Jewish person is, but they will not know much about Christianity and not have experience praying, and your testimony will go a long ways. The difference is that someone from a Hindu or Buddhist background, their Eastern mindset tends to affirm all truth systems. And so a Hindu will say, yes, Jesus was one of the avatars. He was one of the ascended masters, and so I can affirm Christianity too, as well. But remember, if you were here in the morning, I said Paul in Athens tried to make points of connection. He didn't approach the Athenians in opposition and start whipping and saying, you idolaters. Instead, he grabbed the hold and said, I appreciate your spirituality. And what you don't know, this I say, to a Muslim, you say, well, I understand the Quran talks a lot about Jesus. Yes, it does. Have you ever read it? No. Well, it's in your Quran. Let's talk about it. And so there's points of connection that you can definitely bring in to draw them in farther. But it'll be different because people from Eastern religions will tend to affirm more than oppose and be more pluralistic. So yes, all of these are truth systems. So, yeah.
Quick thought. In my experience, it's often very good to not just use Yeshua with Jewish people, because they say, who's this Yeshua? And they say, well, Jesus. So I often have to purposely say Jesus to Jewish people because they don't know about Yeshua, and later they understand we're talking about the same.
Exactly. It is important to use words like Jesus and the New Testament. And if you use overly too much messianic ease, there's Christianese, there's messianic ease. If you use way too much and they're hearing you talking about the Brit Hadashah, Yeshua, Tanakh, what, it'll also have a reverse effect. I have Christians that I know, but this is even more weird. And so it'll sound very alien to a Jewish person who does not know Hebrew, doesn't know. So make sure you're communicating and using some of those words. Well, let me just end with, and then I'll open up for questions. Go to the next one, Edward. Go back? Oh, well, I must have put this in and I forgot to, yeah.
because it refers back to my family. My great-grandmother was given a New Testament. She was Jewish. She was given a New Testament to read on her own, because that was back, 100 years before it was for Jesus. So does that work? Do you ever think to just give them the Bible and let them read it on their own?
Well, so I think it's really important to give your Jewish friend the Bible. They don't own one. It is the Word of God. If you drift out of their life, you want to leave them something, and you want to leave the Word of God in their life. And you can get online a lot of very inexpensive paperback Bibles from the American Bible Society, really cheap. I know that the Holman Christian edition was we bought them for the office, like $2 or $3 each. You can buy, the whole Bible. There was running a sale on, I think it was the American Bible Society in Pullman. I am not hung up on translations. I don't like the King James because it's written in 16th century English, and my daughter, 17th century English, my daughter reads and says, what does this mean? So some of the versions that I like, for someone who's not a believer, who's being introduced to the Bible, the Holman, ESV is good, English Standard Version. I mean, NIV and the American Standard is good too. I like the Message version. I got a hold of that too from my daughter. She's 9. I wanted her to read something that she can understand. It is a translation. It's not a paraphrase. Eugene Peterson, Hebrew scholar, Greek scholar, translated it into a little more of a, I wouldn't use it for really exegetical Bible study, but it's good. There's a few of them, but get a Bible into their hands, and so that they can have something to be reading.
Warning, Chabad forbids their members to read anything they haven't approved. Okay, so that's a sign of a cult, in my mind.
Sure.
But if it's not approved by Chabad, they cannot read it.
But let me say, that, Chabad is a very tiny fraction of all the Jewish community. And it's really, really good to get something. I think that the Spirit of God will, for most Jewish people, will engage their hearts over what they're reading and draw them in. It's really good to get a Bible. I think it's good to get into the Jesus film. For people who don't want to read, that film has really been very successful over the last few decades. It's been translated into hundreds of languages, and so we keep a stack of Jesus films at our office. And I've sent that. I mentioned this morning. I sent it to David Lopez when he prayed to receive Jesus Christ. So get that and get the story into their hands. And then besides that, there's some resources over there. One book I'd like to give out is the Yeshua book. It's a little paperback book over on my table, which goes through the Messianic prophecies, just several of them. It's very easy to read, it's short, it's paperback, and that's a good book to get to a Jewish person who says, how do I know Jesus is the Messiah? And that's a good book to read. And another thing is to get them a testimony book. And I've got one testimony book over there by Stephen James Suwerpan, who was Orthodox, and how he became a believer in Jesus. And so that's also really good. We have some stuff over there. And so one thing I say though, giving them any materials, don't overload somebody. If you give them too much stuff, they won't read any of it. Give them just one or two things, maybe a Bible and one other thing. And then check back to see if they read it, they watched it, they see it. That's just really important to follow up before you load up. Sometimes Christians come with a stack of books. Here, read all of this. And then they don't read any of it. So I'd say, give them something, loan to them. Next, offer to get together with them. Ask, after you do this, let's get together. Ask for a follow-up. Don't just leave it there. Ask if you can get together with them for coffee or something, Starbucks or something, where you can sit down and talk to them and find out what they thought. Follow up with them. If they're willing to get together with you, don't just let it hang out there. Grab a hold of it, follow up, see if they'll get together with you again and talk about it. Yeah.
Question to follow up. Should we, as part of the follow-up, either mobile number from forum or something like that? Because I found I I've given out my card, hey, give me a call, yeah, I really want to talk some more. You know, hear from your friend to have that meeting in Starbucks or whatnot.
Yeah, it's, always try to get contact. It's good if a person doesn't want to give you their contact information. It's good if you give them your card, but if they will, ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. Ask for a follow-up, and then follow up, call them. Remember that the interest level subsides after just a week. The person is interested for about a week. If you don't follow up right away, the interest level goes down like this. So try to follow up on them. If they're willing to get together with you, call them, ask to get together. If they're not, you have their email, just check back every now and then and say, what did you think? You know, just any questions, did you read the book that I left you with? But follow-up is really, really important to not let contacts just die on the vine. And sometimes I've had contacts where I just stay in touch with them for a year, and a year later, they said, you know, I have some questions now, and I'm so glad that I didn't lose touch with them. So yes, ask for contact and follow up on that. Yeah.
Any sensitivities, Jewish sensitivities you want to share with us?
Sure, so I think I didn't include the slide, but I'll just throw it out. Yeah, Jewish sensitivities, don't patronize your Jew, okay? Patronize is, you know, we say to them, oh, you're Jewish, you're the chosen people, I love the Jews. I love the Jews. You know, God pointed you out, yes, you guys love us to death. You love us, and it just does not make them feel, affirming their Jewishness in a loving way, but not patronizing. We certainly here in the Bible do not appreciate that. Number two, don't tell Jewish jokes. Second, don't tell Jewish jokes. First of all, they've heard it before. Second of all, they can tell it better than you. Don't tell Jewish jokes, unless you do. And don't, I think you guys know most of this, but don't make stereotypes or sweeping assumptions about Jewish people. They don't like that. Don't make large sweeping assumptions. Don't assume, this is a Texan thing, don't assume friendliness means openness. Texans tend to be very, very friendly and courteous. They really do. Different than where I come from in LA, where people are a lot more guarded there. Just because a person is friendly and seems curious and listens to you talk about spiritual things, it's a good thing, it's an open door, but it does not mean that they're open. So don't assume that. People are very courteous here in Texas, very friendly. People in the South like to put on their best face. It's good that you have the open door to talk about it, but don't in your heart and your mind immediately assume that means that they're ready tomorrow to pray to receive Jesus. They're not. People are very courteous, but don't abuse the courtesy. And, you know, for those who have been involved in the Messianic movement for a long time, don't try to act like a Hebrew stuff. Because you throw out too much Hebrew stuff, and if they're not a very religious Jew, they're cultural, then you drive them away because they are, I don't know my own Jewishness and this person. And then if they are really religious, you can look like a hokey wannabe, you know, trying to look Jewish, and you're not if they're like one of your Chabad friends or something. So don't overdo it, you know, because it looks like it's overdone, and it doesn't make you look authentic. How many times I run into, you know, churches, Christians who come and say, oh yes, Baruch Hashem, you know, and they say all, they really mess up the Hebrew trying to like impress me or something. But don't do that. And I think that's a good, very good sensitivities. There's just some good things right there. Some of the rest is, like I said, I think you guys already know. Other questions? Yes?
I kind of to some of that stuff you were just saying there, Stan. I worked in the banking industry here for 27 years, and at the risk of sounding stereotypical, I met a lot of Jewish people while I was in banking. And as I became more interested in Jewish evangelism, I began to just engage some of them. We had people working there from the Orthodox community and from Temple Bethel and so forth. Consistently, what I I heard from them was they really don't like it when we as, it's not so much that they have a problem with me being a believer in Jesus. They'll at least talk to me. When I start putting on all the paraphernalia, I start, trying to wear a kippah and stuff like that, they really, really, to a person, did not like that. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, it's true. It's, for a Jewish person, it's different in Israel. It really is. In Israel, you have a Jewish culture, a Jewish country, where it's a part of the fabric of society. There's Meyer, there's B'nai Brak, there's Orthodox communities. When you walk into an Orthodox community like B'nai Brak, you're expected to cover your head, even if it's a baseball cap, and wear long sleeves. And so it's a part of the Hebrew culture there. This is not that culture. And so it does come across forced when you try to look really knowledgeable about, Jewish things or overdo the Hebrew. We live in a culture where people don't talk that way here. They just don't. And if you overdo the Yiddishisms, well, remember also that the Jewish community in Texas is formed by the old German Jews of the 1800s who are not into all that Yiddishism. And frankly, a lot of Jews of the South, they don't like the stereotype of the New York Jew. I didn't growing up at Temple Bethel, and neither did my dad, who comes from this very Southern Jewish culture. We didn't like any of those pushy New York 2-1-2ers. That's the area code of New York. The 2-1-2ers, and the pushy Yiddishism, schmaltz. That's not my background, and I didn't like it. And so a lot of Jewish people, they don't like you overdoing it on the Yiddish expressions and on the throwing out all the Hebrew. If it's not something that's very normal for who you are, they can tell it looks forced. And they know that you're doing it to either impress them or to do something. Just behave normally. I would say avoid Christianese at the same time. Don't go the other route and use a lot of Christian lingo that most Jews aren't familiar with, like born again and words like getting saved and sanctified, and all the Christian doctrinal words that we also can use. But just try to match the language of the office you're in, the way people talk, and it's true, what Jewish people say. But don't be afraid to say you go to a Messianic congregation. It is normal for you to say Yeshua because that is an accepted part of the Messianic Jews, the Jews who go to Messianic congregation, Jews. That has become accepted. It's not, don't be afraid to say it. I'm going to, Shabbat service. That's what you do. So you're not putting on any airs. Be who you are. That's a part of the, that's simply culture, and it is, you have no apologies for that either, also.
I have some friends who grew up in Temple Bethel, but they're now going to Community Bible Church, and they're more comfortable with Community Bible Church than they are here. They don't mind going to Temple Bethel with them, but they would rather have a separation. I'm trying to get them to come here, but they'd rather go to a regular normal church.
You're talking about believers, right?
Yeah, believers. They believe, but they'd rather go to a church than a Jewish congregation.
Well, there's a lot of Jewish people who come to faith in Yeshua who feel comfortable going to a church many times because maybe they were a part of all of that in their synagogue experience, and they say, I've been there, done that,
Yes.
and they want to go, but they'll also at some point, when they want to get back in touch with their Jewish heritage, come here. And what you can say to them is, when they want to celebrate the Jewish holidays and they want to get in touch,
When they did come to me, it was for the holidays.
Sure.
But for a regular, everyday week, they'd rather go to a Normandy church.
It's typical right now in this country. Maybe two more questions.
I've been reading a lot about how Jesus has been revealing himself in dreams to Muslims. Is that common in Jewish people? Or?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Yeah, for decades and decades, it's been said that Muslims come to believe in Jesus through dreams and visions. And I'll tell you, I've seen that amazingly to be true. I know a number of Muslims who come to faith, and it was through, I don't know, that's very true of Muslims. That I've seen. Come to faith through visions and dreams and someone talking to them. and not necessarily true for Jewish people. For Jewish people, I have seen Jews come to faith in Jesus through a friend, through some through messianic prophecies, from not at all, just by God working in their life. It's just different for a lot of people. But I have seen that to be true. But you should never let that be an excuse to not witness to a Muslim. Say, well, I'll wait for them to get the right dream. I think that the Bible is really clear in Romans 10 when it says, how will they hear unless someone is sent? I know there are people who claim, nobody witnessed to me, God himself did it. But somewhere in the back of their life, there was a human agent. And I think I believe the Bible in Romans 10 makes it clear that there is a human agent. Ultimately, God uses people. And so he uses us. Dreams or visions or no dreams or visions. Even the Muslims I know have met who have a testimony of that still say there was someone who came along, they prayed with, or gave them the Bible or something.
But that's even biblical because Cornelius had to send for Peter.
Exactly. I think that's a biblical principle. Cornelius, God, when the angel appeared to Cornelius, he didn't say, hey, Cornelius, I have a question. If you were to die tonight, and he brought Peter to him. So absolutely. One more question?
I think good.
Are there needs in the Jewish community that we could practically meet and thereby show the love of Jesus?
There is, yes. And so what are the social needs? So it's hard now where the Jewish community is. Back when the Jews first started, the immigration started coming in between 1880 and 1920. The Jews who came in from Eastern Europe were illiterate, had no jobs or trades, and were absolutely poor. And so the church in New York was ministering them with soup kitchens. English was a second language. And today, the Jewish community has this huge infrastructure of social services and agencies. But there's still needs there. There still are needs. And I'm sure that at the Jewish Community Center, I know many Messianic congregations that try to meet the needs, check in at the Jewish Community Center to see what some of the needs are. And it's everything from Meals on Wheels, feeding the shut-ins. That's the first thing that comes to mind because my dad was involved in Meals on Wheels. Going and feeding the shut-in to going over to, Golden Manor's gone, is it? Is Golden Manor gone? Is Golden Manor still around?
Oh, I think it is, yeah.
So I don't know what the Jewish Retirement Center is now, but going to the Jewish Retirement Center and having, maybe to do music or something for the Jewish community, the Retirement Center, the shut-ins, Meals on Wheels, these are definitely some of the needs. Back in the 90s, when we had all the Russians coming over, they needed English as a second language classes, but that's kind of gone by the wayside. But that's the first thing that comes to mind here in Texas, in San Antonio, is that. Because even with the Jewish community, they just get overlooked. They really do. There's a Jewish woman, Sharon, who's not a believer. I knew her in Los Angeles. She moved to Dallas. And in Dallas, she didn't know anybody. And she went to a synagogue, and they just really didn't. She's a needy person, divorced, very lonely. I got her in touch with in Dallas, Baruch Hashem. And they just jumped in, and they took her out to eat, and they drove her to the Messianic congregation, and they provided the emotional needs and social needs, and it made a big difference. To my knowledge, she's not yet come to faith in Jesus, but they reached out to her. So, there's the only people that the Jewish community overlooks. Often it's the older people. There's definite social needs here that can be met. So, all right. I'll hang around afterwards, but thanks so much.